La verdad es que todo esto está siendo hoy un poco locura, porque el próximo invitado nuestro, yo creí que había venido en bici desde Londres, por lo que ha tardado en llegar.
Ah, ¿te refieres a esta foto de aquí?
¿A cuál?
No te preocupes. Es un experimento que hizo James Lyne, que analizaba las redes wifi de las principales ciudades europeas, analizando vulnerabilidades. Lo que hay que preguntarle es si Madrid es tu próximo objetivo o no.
Bueno, como James ya ha llegado, pues se lo podemos preguntar ahora. Entre tanto, James Lyne, director estratégico de tecnología de Sophos, nos va a hacer una presentación de los 6 hábitos más comunes utilizados y más exitosos utilizados por los cibercriminales. Sin más, os dejamos con James Lyne.
It's always the problem with having a 63-character password. You get up to present, your screen's locked, you have to type out all of the characters you liked from the recent Mission Impossible film. It's very awkward. There we go. Have you guys got that now? Thank you. Good afternoon. Hello. That's a pretty terrible start. It's like you've all been sat in a dark theatre for extended number of hours. For those of you that don't know me, my name is James Lyne, Global Head of Research at Sophos. And for those of you that haven't seen me present before I get into my presentation, there are a couple of things that I need to go through. I could go through my CV and all the things that I've done over the years, but I have a standard slide that I always use to explain my career so far. Let me show you what this looks like. It's quite terrible. Here we go. By the wonders of video. Now, the two immediate observations. A lot of people go, well, this is presented as a linear thing here. It goes in a straight line. Any of you that you're in any way geeks will know there is a direct correlation between the length of your hair and your technical capability, right? And I have to say that several weeks ago, I had a really difficult bit of malware I needed to reverse engineer. And weirdly, it wasn't until I full-on afroed up again that I could find the solution. I also find sandals help. Anyway, so I've been at Sophos now for about 11 years, and I do spend about half of my time ripping apart the latest interesting malicious code, looking at exploits, which is what I want to look at you with today, but also a good amount of time trying to explain things to the outside world and to the community. I think it's one of the things that we as security people have to focus on the most over the next few years. It's one of the most important pieces of work that we can do. One other little thing I just very quickly need to do, for 2 reasons. I always come with a health and safety warning. Basically 2 things. One, I get a little excited sometimes by this stuff. And if I start speaking incredibly quickly and using amazing buzzwords like the artificial intelligence vector-driven ontological analysis engine, which when accessed by a user at 13:37 on a Tuesday at a particular point in memory using Shinkansen byte encoding, and then tricked into a faulting, or something like that, just feel free to throw something. Hopefully not more rubber ducks. I like the black duck, by the way. It's statistically improbable. Anyway. The other thing is, I am going to show you a couple of real campaigns at the moment, and basically, all I ask is, please don't download any of the viruses that I show you, unless you work in a research lab or alike. Please practice safe hexadecimal. All right. So, for those of you that haven't come across me before, I have a number of really terrible hobbies. I'm very interested by certain types of malware, and one of the things that I've done over the years is collected together some of my favorite scams. Now, spam collecting is a hobby that is only slightly more cool than collecting stamps, I appreciate. But it's amazing to me what people will click on. There are certain stereotypes of what a good scam is. If you walk up to someone in the street outside and say, you know, what does a spam look like? They'll tell you it's a message from a Nigerian banker who wants to give you $50 billion because he, likes your face or something, I don't know. Or maybe they'll tell you about the offer of an iPhone you can get for €2. There are actually significantly better scams out there, but there is still a place for that overt scam. I want to show you, these are a few of my favorites. Keep in mind, whilst I go through these, to get onto this slide, 1,000 people had to fall victim to them, okay? So up here we have a nice scam message, and it says up here, let me go over here, it's going to be far easier. It says, if you are a time traveler or alien disguised as human and or have the technology to travel physically through time, I need your help. Strong opening sales pitch from the scammers, right? And they go on to talk about the bank accounts they want. I love the bit at the end as well. It says, please do not reply if you're an evil alien. Who are the people that click on this stuff? I mean, really? I'm sure that many of you would be tempted by the beep in large patch will make your beep so large you'll be able to park a car on it. I mean, that just sounds painful. Why would anyone want that? Or the Book of Evil for Christmas, or be Stallone in bed. I can't imagine anyone wants to be Sylvester Stallone in bed. That sounds terrible. So people do click on this stuff, yes. But here's an interesting problem for us in the security industry. When we form an idea about good practice or what a scam looks like, we hold on to it for years and years and years. If you go and talk to most businesses today and say, what's a good password? They'll reel off, 8 characters and all these complex permutations, or just 8 characters sometimes, which of course today is completely wrong. By most accounts, a 14-character password is now your kind of minimum to be resistant to the computing power we deal with today. So there are many occasions where best practice or our perception of cybercriminals are very misaligned to what's actually going on. Now, many of you will know, of course, about how cybercriminals have professionalized over the last few years. I've ranted about it endlessly for years now. I continue to be staggered by the amazing innovations of cybercriminals. And it's not always the technical things they accomplish that amaze me. A lot of the time it's their business or marketing innovation that is astounding. I was part of an investigation with a news program in the UK last week, where we infiltrated a number of credit card purchase sites or auto shops online on what they persist in calling the dark web. I hate the term the dark web. It really annoys me because it's basically just the internet. But they really like it because it makes it sound sinister and sexy, and they can take photos of you in a dark, dimly lit room running a command prompt with Telnet, because Telnet's so useful for testing your email server. I can't think of anything else you could do with it. Anyway, and when you look at these sites, they are staggeringly well put together. It is amazing, the innovation of these cybercriminals. These are a collection of a few of my favorites over the years. These are exploit packs. They've been really a driving force of malware distribution for some time now. These are products designed by cybercriminals to be sold to cybercriminals. Now these span a variety of different time periods. Up here we have the black hole exploit pack. This is an older one, but I have it here because it was at one point responsible for 1/3 of global malware distribution. At one point they were responsible for 1/3 of over 250,000 pieces of malware a day. Available for between $700 and $2,000. What I love about these guys is they were the first to make cybercrime business reporting dashboards. And you have to admit, it's a lot sexier than most security product interfaces. I mean, they could probably teach people a thing or two, right? And then over here we have the crime pack, less technically proficient than the others, but look at it. I mean, that is badass, isn't it? You've got, guns and drugs and money. By the way, I know it's impossible to sound gangster with a British accent. It just doesn't work. I'll put a cap in your arse is the least threatening expression that's ever been said. Regardless, pretty sexy user interface, good functionality. But the one I want to focus on is this one at the front here. Neutrino. Now, sure enough, there's about 50 different cybercrime products out there distributing exploits, making it easy to infect systems. But the thing that's interesting about these guys is their business model. It's the maturity of other processes they've started to wrap around their offering that make them excellent at finding the things that we all suck at securing. These guys were the first to offer a managed service for cybercriminals. You see, no cybercriminal in 2015 wants to buy on-premise software. I mean, that's very old-fashioned, isn't it? What you want is a cloud service for $300-400 a month. And they even went as far as offering a money-back guarantee if law enforcement took your server down. Now, good luck kind of enforcing your consumer rights with a Russian cybercriminal gang. Actually, that sounds like a fun weekend project. But it's an interesting message nonetheless. Now, from this we've seen tons and tons and tons of gangs picking up and using the same types of toolkits. This has really been the driving force of the majority of malicious code for a while now. But there are new and interesting things happening here, like this. At the top here, we have a sample from an RTF file, a rich text file. I'm going to go through the source code of this exploit in a little more depth shortly and show you exactly how it works. But what's interesting here is their tracking element. They have metrics on how many people get their scams. They have metrics on how many people open them. And they have metrics on how many people end up being exploited. They have more data than any of us on exactly what works from a scam perspective and what doesn't. And when it starts to move towards a point where people know about it, they can shift on quickly. Now, I wanted to go through some exploitation stuff here and talk about some new trends. How many of you are fairly technical people? Quite technical? Yeah? I thought you kind of went, don't ask me any questions, but okay. It's like when you go, how many people have a Windows phone? You work for Microsoft, right? Yes. It's the kind of, it's actually quite a nice phone. Is it one of the Nokia ones, or? Yeah, it is. Okay, that's almost acceptable. Anyway. I could spend lots of time going through in depth how modern exploits work, but frankly, it's 6 hours of material. Before I dive into one specific example, for those of you that don't spend your time in the world of exploits, I wanted to explain to you an interesting challenge for the cybercriminals. You remember Windows XP? I mean, some of you probably don't remember it, you're probably still using it, but generally speaking, most of us remember Windows XP. Exploiting Windows XP was really quite trivial. You found a software vulnerability due to an error, and there was very little to stop an attacker from writing an exploit. It often was a process of mere hours to make something function. With Windows 7, we got things like data execution prevention, address-based layout randomization. Windows 8, we got additional ROP mitigations. We got isolated, heap, protected, free, deferred, free. We got all kinds of wonderful things like avoidance of null pointer dereferencing through avoiding mapping of the first 64 kilobits of memory. In Windows 10, we got control flow guard. Lots and lots and lots of acronyms. Now, some of you know what I'm talking about. For those of you that don't, this may help. Exploiting Windows XP was like jumping off the first floor of your house, landing on a trampoline, springing into the air, and hitting the center of the dartboard. Okay? It was very precise control of memory that was required. But it was very possible to jump off your house onto a trampoline and hit the center of the dartboard with a bit of practice. With Windows 10 and all these mitigations, it's like jumping off your house onto a trampoline, hitting the center of the dartboard, whilst also juggling and being blindfolded, whilst dressed as RoboCop riding a unicorn. I just put that in there because it's awesome. I was Googling one day and I found it. I'm like, that's the best thing in the universe. And I Googled it. There's pages of them. Like, this is a thing. It's one of my favorite memes. Regardless, it's extremely difficult. There are lots and lots of things that can get in your way and prevent an exploit from working. So what have the cybercriminals done to cope with this? I'll show you shortly this exploit example, but in many cases, they're avoiding that problem altogether. The intense use of social engineering has kind of landed back on our doorsteps. And some of these are not the Nigerian banker that wants to give you $40 million. They're amazingly convincing. This first one here, we need to organize a meeting. It's a scam I've seen. The subject says that, and the body goes on to accuse you of sexual assault at work. Now think about that. You're being drawn into the HR team accused of something really serious. Hopefully your first reaction is, I didn't do that. You know, if it's like, oh yeah, it's probably going to go badly for you. But if your reaction is, I didn't do that, you're going to feel horrified that someone's accused you of this. What do? You open the attached document to find out more details about the accusation. How many of you use Amazon? Any Amazon users? Yes. Do you have the same problem as me, where you order something from Amazon, and then it turns up like days later, and you have no idea what you ordered? Because there's just this constant flow of Amazon packages arriving on your doorstep with stuff you don't need. And so for me, at any point in time, it's perfectly plausible I have ordered something from Amazon that I've forgotten about. That just could be any day of my life. So if I get a convincing email from Amazon saying, log in here, we're about to return your package and charge you, it's perfectly possible that you might click on it. Or something like a police incident report. For those of you that have been in the industry for a long time, this may be a surprise to you, but where web-based distribution of malware has been the major focus of cybercriminals for years and years now, document-based malware is actually proving to be an incredibly effective tool. I know, right? It's like 1995 again. You remember macro viruses? I should be less excited about this, but anyway. Let me show you a few examples of these, and then I'll take you through a specific example. First off, we do have a small problem with this audience, okay? And the small problem is that you are all in what I like to call information security cynic mode. Let's see if I can move this across here. Whoop. There it is. Whoa. This is almost impossible to drive. Okay, let's do it the high-tech hack way. I love latency from scalers. It's like the best thing in the world. It's going to be like a pantomime, isn't it? He's behind you. Anyway. All right. So, we have a problem with this audience, and here is the problem. You are listening to a security guy speaking about security stuff, and not the first security guy speaking about security stuff today, which means by default, anything I show you, your brain will go, I wouldn't click on that. How many of you, if you were asked to go to a friend's house for a barbecue, would say, you were in IT or you were in security or something like that? Any of you? Yeah, a couple. So you're familiar with the phenomena. If you say that, what's the first thing that happens? Someone asks you to fix their printer, right? You like, yes, I'm a world-renowned malware researcher. They're like, oh, great, could you fix my iPad? Okay. You've had that experience? Yes, okay. I want you all to imagine you are those people when you look at these scams. So let me open up this first document here. It's a little nasty one that was doing the rounds quite recently. So let's open up this one here. Okay, I'm going to open it up. It opens up in Word. And I know what you're thinking. Looks totally safe, right? I mean, we've got some, what I think is either Russian or Welsh characters. I'm not entirely sure. Actually, I think it's complete nonsense. The keen-eyed amongst you will notice an interesting little security warning at the top. Security warning, macros have been disabled. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the infection equivalent of asking people nicely to run malware on their computers. And people do. Now, obviously, there are more convincing scams. I mean, this is kind of a very ugly example. Surely they can do better. Well, let's have a look at this next one here, the -LF one. Here we go. I kind of love this. It says that this file is protected by Microsoft Office. Please enable editing and content to see the document. And they provide instructions. How helpful of the cyber criminals to tell you precisely how to screw yourself over. It's perfect. Well, the only problem is it doesn't look very official, does it? I mean, it looks like a bit of just a dodgy document that someone put together. So surely they can do better. Take a look at this one. This is actually my favorite malware sample so far this year. To view this document, please turn on editing mode and macros is. I love me some macros. I love it when they make brilliant grammar mistakes. It's always good. Now, it's a little blurry here, but if we scroll down here, what we're seeing is a series of different instructions for the from the cyber criminals for various different versions of Office, how to decrypt this particular payload and install it. So this really is the ask nicely. Now, I know some of you are still thinking there's no way that I or anyone I know would click on that. But look at this one. No grammar errors, convincing little instructions. Imagine if this was entitled after an RFP for some big deal that you wanted, or, company salaries. It's always a good one. Something like that. And if you still don't think you could click it, at lunchtime, if you go to the bar and have a couple of tequilas and then give me your email address, we'll see. It's an astonishingly simple attack vector from the cyber criminals that relies on the user being snared, and for which it's easy to generate lots of permutations that make it harder to detect. Now, there have been loads and loads of variations of these, but I want to focus on a more exploitive example. And I love this one because it's a little older, it shouldn't work, but it still is. This was a really weird piece of malware. Really strange. It did something I've never seen in my 11 years of playing with malware before. When you opened up this Word file, it triggered the exploit, which I'll go through in a moment, and immediately it opened up a dating page for a male dating site, and whilst you were distracted by Bruno 160's package, it would delete all of the files on your computer and any attached to the network. No ransomware, no stealing of information, just wanton destruction. It just deletes stuff. Isn't that weird? Now, the original vulnerability, for those of you that want the technical details, is essentially an object confusion attack. Gets an opportunity to control execution by virtue of an incorrect value in the list override count in the RTF file format when Microsoft Word processes it, causing confusion between two different base classes when instantiated. Or, for everyone else, bad shit happens, basically. Let me show you how this goes down from here. I've got a copy of this file called We've Got Your Kids. Now, this goes back to a really interesting scam again. And what would happen is you'd get an email that said, we hijacked your kids after you dropped them off at school this morning. Open the attached file to see a photo and know that we're not making it up. So, of course, I read this and thought, shit, I've got kids. That's a pretty surprising news story for me. Oh, come on. How many of you have children? Yes? How many of you would be suspicious but panicked by an email like that? Yeah? Good honesty. By way, I would never click on anything that you sent me. All right. So when you open up this file, the original has a picture of a gorilla, which, of course, in the case of some people's children, is literally true. And in the background, it would deploy malicious code. Well, let's have a look at how this one works. I'm going to jump over to the attacker's system. This is the source code for it over here. There we go. And this particular attack uses a technique known as ROP, probably one of the most influential exploit techniques of the past 10 years. Essentially, it works by taking the address of code that's already in memory and reorganizing it all, one thing after another, to create a new program from someone else's. It's like walking into the middle of a conversation and choosing only the words that you like to form some new meaning. And this is a classic mechanism for getting around some of the mitigations that are in place in modern operating systems. So, let me show you how this guy works here in a little more depth. Let's start up a handler. We're just going to use the Metasploit project's Meterpreter as a payload here, just to illustrate the issue. So I'll jump back over to Windows 7 here, and I'm going to open up We've Got Your Kids. Okay? So we hit Edit here, and it says Starting. Now, of course, Microsoft Word hanging is not really news. I mean, that happens 10, 15 times a day anyway, right? I mean, what's the standard procedure? You go make a coffee, or you just restart it, or you just, open up Solitaire. Although they ruined Solitaire in the latest version of Windows, because it's no longer sol.exe, it's in the game center. It's really sad. Anyway. So, Microsoft Word's there, and it's crashed. And let's look at our attacker's system. Some of you may recognize the familiar Meterpreter Session 2 opened. What's happened is Word has crashed, we've jumped into our ROP chain, and it's deployed the payload of the Meterpreter. Now, Word's still sitting there, but of course it's very easy for us to migrate into a different process. This gives us all of the functionality that pretty much any malicious code today would have. We can grab photos of the screen with the screenshot command, which makes it nice and easy to see what the user is up to. If we want to, we could install a VNC client and take control. Let's have a look at some keyboard logging. That's always fun. We'll look for Explorer, and we'll migrate into the Explorer process. Always good to hide there. As soon as we migrate, Microsoft Word should go and crash. Again, something the user will be very used to, so it's not going to raise any alarms. And then we can do something like starting a keyboard logger. We jump over to our Windows 7 system. And go back to our attacker. It captures everything in real time. Any usernames, passwords, you name it. From here, we've got a good pivot point to go and take over the rest of the system. Although my absolute favorite functionality is still the ability to access the webcam. If you have one connected, I don't have one on this one. Let's add a webcam. I feel like it's the right thing to do. Here we go. Now, my Windows 7 system now has a webcam. There we go. I'm definitely tweeting that. It's a wonderful photo. All right. It's the shock and horror that someone would open we've got your kids.docx. So from here, we obviously can do anything we want, and as the attacker, we've won. But let's just double back to this code here. If we were to open up Microsoft Word and look at this process in a debugger, let's just do that very briefly. For those of you that haven't used a debugger before, it's basically just going to let us step through and have a look at, there we go, step through and have a look at the state of Microsoft Word's protections and see how they've managed to bypass everything. There we go. So we're in our debugger. We're going to load a Python module, which lets us do some scripting. And we're going to use a tool called Mona by the infamous Corlan coder to have a look at the state of all these modules. Here we go. So these are all the DLLs inside Microsoft Word. And notice all the mitigations, things like ASLR, Safe SEH, you name it. Everything's looking good. I mean, you'd expect Microsoft to use their own controls, wouldn't you? Well, let's jump back to this point in the code where the attacker gets control. Here we go. There's a certain module called mscomctl.ocx, and what we've just done is said, allow Word to launch, allow it to start opening the file, but just set an exception and pause execution at the point where we get to that file so that we can see exactly what's going on. This is a really useful little trick to be able to start understanding how this exploit works. On our attacker's system, whilst it's stepping through that, you'll notice here the first address in this ROP chain where it gets control is this 275DE6AE inside mscomctl.ocx. And that's that first point that we should be landing on. Now here's the interesting thing. If all of these mitigations are enabled, memory should be jumping around all over the place. It should be exceedingly difficult to find anything stationary that the attackers can use for exploitation purposes. It's exactly those kinds of mitigations that have led more and more to us having